specialist. I use Z0 pronouns. This Zoom service is being recorded and it is streaming live to YouTube. For those of you in person in the sanctuary, please turn the sound off on any devices you have or just turn those devices off altogether. Please also note that you can see the subtitles on the screen at the front of the room, and you will be able to view the chat during the Sharing from the Heart section. And for those online, I hope you will find a candle or a chalice, and in a moment we can light them together. Thank you all for your grace and adaptability as we all remember it's about connection, not perfection.
Good morning. My name is Troy Fisher and I use he, him pronouns. It's good to see you. We're going to be singing from the Till Hymn book, hymn number 1024, When the Spirit Says Do. You can also find the lyrics posted in the chat. And I invite you to rise in body and or spirit and let's sing together.
Good morning. Welcome to the Olympia Unitarian Universalist Congregation online/in-person worship service. We welcome each of you to this celebration of love and to this congregation. The OUUC community comes together in the mutual promises and possibilities of our covenant. We envision an interconnected world that is loving, just, and healthy. We commit to live out our mission to welcome and wonder, embrace and empower, bridge and become. We're so glad you are here. My name is Emmy Allen. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a member of the worship arts team. Leading worship with me today is our minister, Reverend Mary Gear, Troy Fisher, our music director, and Curtis Tanner, co-celebrant. We are grateful for the many hands that helped make worship happen this morning. Thank you to the ushers and greeters, the breakout hosts, the tech team members, the youth staffing the nursery awaiting the return of your young ones, and all who contribute in so many ways. If you are new to OUUC, welcome. We'd love to hear from you. You can fill out our visitor card at the link in the chat, or please talk to a greeter. After the service, everyone will have the chance to discuss reflection questions offered by Reverend Mary. For those online, we invite you to go into a breakout room for a virtual reflection circle. This is a chance to gather with a small group to say hello and check in. Each breakout room will be hosted by someone to help make sure everyone knows each other and has a chance to share. For those in person, please feel free to bring the reflection questions into your discussions, or if you want to join a group, you can gather here in the youth room with Jen Sable, and the questions are printed on the order of service. We hope you'll join the discussion wherever you are.
Good morning. I'm Curtis Tanner, a member of the worship arts team. I use he, him pronouns. Plan to return here after the reflection circles for a board listening session. The OUUC Board of Trustees invites you to come dream with me as we reflect on what we have learned these past 2 years. Then, be sure to stop by the OUUC parking lot today between noon and 2 p.m. for an equinox celebration. You can paint a pot, plant some mystery seeds, getting your hands in the dirt as we welcome spring. This coming Thursday evening, Reverend Carol McKinley and Troy Fisher offer the weekly spiritual practice. It's a chance to catch up with ourselves midweek and consider fragments of holiness. There are many opportunities to stay connected to our community. Please check the website regularly. If you have questions or need help, please check in with a staff member. Now, let us open our hearts and minds as we prepare for worship. Welcome, everyone. It is good to be together.
This morning and every Sunday morning, we join Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world in lighting a chalice, the symbol of our faith tradition. Please join me as we light our chalices together with these words from Alice Anacheka Nasman. In a time of uncertainty, when everything around us is changing constantly, each day new developments, rising numbers, changing guidelines. When the world we live in suddenly seems upside down and topsy-turvy, we light our chalice to remind ourselves of our grounding in our faith. We remember that the flaming chalice came into being as a beacon of hope during World War II, a secret symbol that offered help. In the midst of it all, we wrap ourselves in the warm light of a familiar flame, a reminder of the strength that emerges when we come together in community.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Mary, and I use she, her pronouns. Our opening words this morning are offered by the Reverend Joan Javier Duval. We might not automatically think of a church community as a place that is risky. In fact, you might feel it's the opposite of risky. It's safe, it's comfortable, and it is certainly those things at times. But I believe that this community is also a place of risk. It is a place for taking risks. It is a place of risk because it is a place where we ask one another to make commitments. It is a place where we learn together what it means and what it feels like to follow through on commitments, and where we in fact make some of those commitments together in communal action. And when we are committed, we are in danger of both making change and of being changed. We risk transformation. Come, let us worship together.
Let's sing together again, hymn number 1020 from the Till Hymn Book, 1020, Wo Ya Ya. The lyrics can also be found posted in the chat. I invite you to rise in body and or spirit, and let's sing together. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh ya ya, oh ya ya, oh ya ya, oh ya ya. We are going. Heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Oh ya ya, oh ya ya, oh ya ya, oh ya ya, oh ya 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 ya. Thank you for singing.
My story for you today comes from the Taoist tradition. They tell of an old farmer who had worked their crops with their horse for many years. One day, their horse ran away. Upon hearing their news, their neighbors came to visit. "Such bad luck," they said sympathetically. "Maybe," the farmer replied. The next morning, the horse returned, bringing with it other wild horses. "How wonderful," the neighbors exclaimed. "Maybe," replied the farmer. The following day, their son tried to ride the untamed horse. He was thrown, and he broke his leg. The neighbors came again to offer their sympathy of the farmer's misfortune. "Maybe," answered the farmer. The day after, military officials came to the village to draft young men into the army. Seeing that the son's leg was broken, they passed him by. The neighbors congratulated the farmer on how well things had turned out. "Maybe," the farmer said. This ends our story.
We came together in community this morning, bringing everything that is in our lives. In this space, we draw on the strength of our community to hold everything that we bring here with us. In this space, we share from our hearts what brings us joy and sorrow, what brings us worry and delight, what makes us afraid, and what makes us dance. Let's open our hearts to the complexity of life today, our own and others. If you'd like something shared in the service, please feel free to fill out the form on the website or just send me an email and we'll bring it into the service next week. You will hear a drumbeat as we share today. It brings into our awareness that our individual hearts beat, and together we create the heartbeat of this community. As we share, we place stones in the water, stones holding the complexity of our lives, placed in the water of community. So right now, let's just take a breath in and out as we open our hearts to receive all that is in our lives, the complexity of life and this world. Once again, we open our hearts to the people of Ukraine who are fighting for their homeland, for their sense of democracy, and representing all of us in the world in a fight for an ideal that holds that everyone is important and all voices matter. And today I add a prayer for the people of Russia who are protesting and saying that there is not to be a war in our name at the risk of their lives. And whatever happens with the affairs of humans, the earth turns, and today we welcome the coming of spring. Today is the equinox, when it is equal light and dark, and we move toward more light in our world, and it is much needed. If you are online, I invite you to share from your heart by entering in the chat. This is a time to share everything that you wish, joys and sorrows, and everything that is shared from your heart. And as we take in what is posted, let's hear the heartbeat of our community and reach out our hearts in love and care to those who share. And for those in person today, I invite you to come forward if there is something you would like to bring into this community. You may place a stone in the water as you hold your sharing in your heart. We also invite the singers from the Commons to join us in the sanctuary to share. And I would invite you to come forward through the center aisle and return by the sides. we'll place, pardon me, we'll place a stone in the water for all that has been shared from the heart, a stone holding the complexity of our lives, held in the water of community. And one more stone in the water for all that we hold in our hearts and that remains unspoken. I invite you now into a time of reflection, prayer, and meditation. This is a prayer of risk by Tamara Labak. Take a breath as we take in these words. Holy One who has given us the breath of life, today we remember to breathe deeply, to rest, to take in, to pause before we act, and then to take in another deep breath poised on the edge and risk jumping in, risk taking action, risk speaking up, risk using the gifts we have been given so that at the end of our life we can say with absolute clarity that no part of our existence was wasted for fear of failure or fear of success. Hold us. Prepare us the way to begin to offer the gift of our awakened presence, full of love and light today. These and the prayers of our hearts we lift up now in a time of silence together. Amen.
So many What are we always hiding for? Does nobody want to see it? Does nobody understand? The power to heal is right here in our hands. We can be kind. We can take care of each other. We can remember that deep down inside, we all need the same things. And maybe we'll find, if we are there for each other, that together we'll weather whatever tomorrow may bring. That together we'll weather whatever tomorrow may bring.
As we celebrate OUUC's first spring stewardship drive, the stewardship team has a message for us.
Prior to coming to OUUC, before I ever came to OUUC, I was a member of a different faith community in Olympia, and I was part of a little committee called the Social Justice Committee. And that was my connection with social justice issues as part of that faith community. Then I came over to OUUC and discovered that social justice permeates the whole community here. And it's a big part of what OUUC is. And I also discovered that this is where all of my other social justice friends were hanging out on Sundays. They were all there at OUUC, and that was amazing to me. And so it's different from my former experience with a different faith community, but it also has a deeper spiritual component than the other social justice groups that I've been involved with over the years. Those provided a lot of opportunity for me to be active in social justice issues and environmental justice. But right here at OUUC, it's just part of the identity of this community, and felt like a good place to be.
It thrills me to see new people coming to this church, and especially during this COVID shutdown, the number of people who have joined the church without ever having been in the building. And why is that possible? Some, by your works you shall be known, or something like that. They see us in the community, active in the community, whether it's with Justice Not Jails, or serving the homeless, bringing food to the food bank, a variety of ways that we serve in the community.
Well, OUUC has the values that I value, and particularly Olympia UUC is very kind, very open, and provides more classes and organizations than I've seen in any other church. I mean, haven't been to a lot of UUCs, but when I joined, I attended a class to learn about UUC, and there were about 7 other people there, and about half of that group was young family, and that's very encouraging to see. because you know that children are going to learn and children are going to participate. So hopefully they grow up and they become UU members too.
OUUC has helped me grow personally, particularly during the coming of age program. Something that's different about OUUC compared to other communities I've been in is that OUUC actually like welcomes and even encourages people to speak their opinions, even when they don't agree, even when everybody else has a different opinion other than them. Whereas in most modern day human society, people tend to want people to like passively agree with everything. And then when they don't agree, a lot of people tend to either silence them or sway them into believing something else. So I like that we're allowed to have like openness here. So yeah, it helped me figure out who I was in that way.
I've really been inspired by being a part of the OUUC community. I think primarily by the other members of the congregation and their open hearts and their wisdom, their experience, that just feeds me as far as those connections between people. But as an individual, I've grown a lot in just being aware of needs that we should be addressing as human beings and as members of the larger community, and the energy that is here for making connections with the larger community. And it's not an isolated little group over here. So we're connected to each other and connected to the larger community, and the larger community is aware that there's an energy here at OUUC that really supports the humanity of people outside, and that's a huge value.
Each Sunday, we express our gratitude by joining together in service to our community and to something greater than ourselves. The offering collected here does two things. It supports the ongoing work of OUUC, which is also supported by your regular pledges. This offering also supports an organization that serves our community in harmony with our Unitarian Universalist values. In January and February, our generous donations sent $2,063.17 to the Thirst and Climate Action Team. Thank you. For the months of March and April, our Share the Plate recipient is the Olympia Mutual Aid Partners, or OUUC. The mission of OUUC is to support all people's right to a safe and warm place to call home. OUUC centers the voices of unhoused and marginalized peoples, challenges systems of oppression, builds bridges between unhoused and housed community members through engagement and education. They provide health, safety, and stability support to our neighbors living outdoors. Personally, I'm connected with the organizers of OUUC, and I really encourage you to support this organization. They're doing good work. Please note, is there a slide? No, okay. Please note that you can participate in the offering by making a donation online through the church website or by texting the number that appears on your screen. You can also mail a check to OUUC or place your offering in one of the baskets that ushers will bring around. May the offering now be generously given as it is gratefully perceived.
And it's not enough to talk about it. It's not enough to sing a song. We must walk the walk about it. You and I, do or die. We've got to try to get along. We can be kind. We can take care of each other. We can remember that deep down inside, we all need the same things. And maybe we'll find, if we are there for each other, that together we'll weather whatever tomorrow may bring. And maybe we'll find true peace of mind if we always remember we can be
Thank you for your generous gifts. Today's reading is The Growing Edge by Howard Thurman. All around us, worlds are dying and new worlds are being born. All around us, life is dying and life is being born. The fruit ripens on the tree. The roots are silently at work in the darkness of the earth, against a time when there shall be new leaves, fresh blossoms, green fruit. Such is the growing edge.
It is the extra breath from the exhausted lung, the one more thing to try when all else has failed, the upward reach of life when weariness closes in upon all endeavor. This is the basis of hope in moments of despair, the incentive to carry on when times are out of joint and people have lost their reason, the source of confidence. When worlds crash and dreams whiten into ash, the birth of the child, life's most dramatic answer to death. This is the growing edge incarnate. Look well to the growing edge.
This ends our reading.
Weeks ago, I attended a gathering at a private home, one of the first invitations like that I've accepted in quite some time. As I left my home, I put on a mask on a lanyard around my neck, something I do whenever I leave home these days. And when I arrived at the gathering, I could see from the doorway that there were about 18 or so people in the home, all without masks. And in a split second, I decided to put my mask in my jacket pocket, and I stepped inside. It was both liberating and terrifying. I noticed that I was so delighted to see people's faces, to stand around and chat as if the world was not on fire, It was such a joy to be together in person. And I also noticed that the entire time I was there, which was a little more than an hour, there was an alarm in the back of my brain that was going, danger, danger, danger. So let's just pause a minute. How are you doing? How is your body and your mind? Your danger, danger alarm might have been triggered just by hearing my story. That's how our brains work. And my apologies if so. I would remind us to breathe. We all need reminders to breathe these days. You see, we humans all have this alarm in the back of our heads. It's the amygdala, a small organ in our brains that helps us process emotions, especially the emotions of fear and pleasure. It's a part of the limbic system that helps us respond to danger and to avoid pain. It's part of our survival brain. It's what prompts that automatic response to fight, flee, or freeze when we are faced with danger. So in that doorway of that gathering, my survival brain was telling me, danger, leave right now. And that alarm didn't stop when I left the gathering. It continued throughout the day and off and on for some days after. And all during that time, I paused to breathe and re-engage my thinking brain, telling myself that chances were I was just fine. And I was. Stress serves a purpose. The stress response helps us stay safe. Our brains notice a threat and they prompt us to respond. Back in our cave-dwelling days when humans were in danger from predators, our brains helped us survive. We would face a threat and then fight or flee or do whatever we needed to resolve the threat, and then it would be done, and our bodies and minds would return to calm once again. The problem with our modern day stressors is that they don't end or resolve. Our stress is chronic, and wow, has it been lately. We stay under continual stress, so our bodies and minds don't ever know that we are safe even when we are. For 2 years, our brains have been on alarm saying danger, danger, danger. No wonder we are exhausted and burned out. We've been living with an extremely high level of chronic stress and uncertainty for quite some time. And I would say not one of us is our best selves right now. So in order to remind our bodies and spirits that we are safe, because mostly we are, we must intentionally end the stress cycle and reset our brains. And we can do that with practices like moving our bodies, crying, breathing, laughing, getting affection like a hug from a friend, and being creative. Think of all the creativity we've heard about or participated in through the pandemic. Knitting, singing, drawing, cooking. It is not by accident that I invite us to breathe together often in worship, in spiritual practices, and sometimes in meetings. I need that pause just as much as anybody else. We have to develop practices that calm our brains and bodies, reminding us that mostly we are safe. And so it might be odd that I'm going to talk about risk at a time like this. Don't we already have enough risk in our lives? And yet, as I've reflected on this month's spiritual theme of become, I kept coming back again and again to the idea of risk. In order to become what we say is our OUUC mission in the world, in order to become, we have to take risks. Becoming implies movement, growth, change, even transformation. Becoming means exploring our growing edges, as Howard Thurman names them, the places where we are challenged just enough to be healthy. When we think we've reached our limit and we move ahead, finding that energy to take the next best step. To become means to risk. And so I wonder if we might engage our thinking brains and consider risk a little bit differently. While our survival brains rightly want us to be safe, our thinking brains know that perhaps the best we can do is safer. We know that we take risks every day, even when we're not in a pandemic. We drive cars. We use electricity. We use cell phones, sometimes while walking, I hope not while driving. The world we live in has dangers. It always has. And honestly, to live is to risk. So maybe what we need is an ethic of risk, a set of moral principles that helps us make good decisions given the reality of risk. This idea was developed by Unitarian Universalist theologian Dr. Sharon Welch in her book, The Feminist Ethic of Risk. Dr. Welch developed her theology of risk in response to her experience in the feminist movement. She observed that anyone who engages in social justice work does so with an incomplete understanding of the situation and no guarantee ever or control over the outcome. Whenever we do justice work, we take a risk because we never have all the information we might like in order to help us strategize, and it is impossible to guarantee success, and we do it anyway. Welch asks, how does a movement for justice persist in the face of partial victories and continued defeats? Welch sought to address what she named middle-class despair. Hers is a question for our time, not just for justice movements. How do we as a people persist in a time that feels precarious, where the victories are few and fleeting and the defeats are many? Whether we're thinking about the pandemic, or the fragility of democracy here and around the world, or the climate crisis or racial injustice that continues century after century, how do we remain engaged in justice work and not turn away from the enormity of it? How do we have the hope to take the next best step? How do we sustain that hope? Welch's answer is to develop an ethic of risk, and Welch names it responsible action grounded in community with a willingness to take strategic risks. Welch lays out a theology that calls us to risk taking a step toward our goal, letting go of the outcomes and holding on to the possibilities. Embracing what is possible, keeping the ideal, the dream, instead of clinging to an outcome that we can't control. It is easiest for our brains to think of all the risks of becoming who we truly are, of becoming different than we have been. We might lose friends. It might be uncomfortable. It might even feel unsafe. But we have to be intentional to remember that there are also risks to not becoming who we truly are, to not change when it is time to do so. We might lose connection to our true self. We might live in despair and helplessness without integrity. We might become irrelevant and disconnected from others and the world. And so Welch's theology invites us to embrace community, communities of memory of the past and hope for the future, and developing a community in this present time that is as diverse as possible, taking the risk of bridging differences. An ethic of risk would invite us to acknowledge that we can't control the outcome and we must take the right step anyway. An ethic of risk would invite us to let go of a limited definition of success and embrace that there are always gains and defeats and that we may never see the results of our actions. We can't ever know the outcome of our actions because of the complexity of our interconnection. An ethic of risk would invite us to move past despair and move toward hope. And if you think about it, that's exactly what COVID has invited us to do. To take responsible actions like wearing a mask and getting vaccinated, and to take those actions in community with the common good in mind, and to take strategic risks to learn new ways of connecting and of being in the world. And when we're ready, we might take that leap of faith, that next step into the doorway of re-engagement with the world. It is also what the world situation is asking us to consider. How do we decide what responsible action is when democracy is at risk? The ideal that each person is worthy and has a voice. How much are we willing to risk in order to protect that ideal? How much will we risk in order to bring that ideal into reality? The people of Ukraine have an answer, and they are risking everything. The people of Russia protesting the war are risking their lives. Those of us in the rest of the world will be asked to consider what we are willing to risk and how we share that risk so that the impacts are not disproportionate to those on the margins. In this situation, what is responsible action grounded in community? And that's the global discussion and decision right now. As Reverend Javier Duval reminded us in our opening reading today, a faith community is also a risky place. Yes, you may find comfort and safety here, and that's a good thing. And a faith community is a place of risk because it's a place where we ask one another to make commitments. We make commitments to each other, to our faith, to this institution, to our community, and we commit to justice. Being in community requires the risk of relationship, the risk of change, and the risk of commitment. And once we make those commitments, we are called to take responsible action grounded in community to make our vision come to life, our vision of an interconnected world that is loving, just, and healthy. We are called to risk in service to that mission. As we consider where to place our time and energy and financial resources, what are we willing to commit to? Being part of a faith community isn't a consumer transaction where something is delivered to our doorstep in an Amazon box. What are we willing to risk in order to live into those commitments? So as we begin to gather again here at OUUC and elsewhere, We will be asked to calculate how much risk we are willing to take over and over again every day in each situation we face. For some of us, this time feels liberating. For others, it feels more dangerous. And some of us feel both at the same time. We each have to consider our circumstances and describe what is a reasonable risk to decide for ourselves what is a reasonable risk and what isn't. What we do know is that uncertainty will continue. And honestly, I think learning to live with uncertainty is a part of learning to live with COVID and learning to live in this world. Here are some ideas for what we can do as we learn to live with that uncertainty. We can increase our awareness of our stressors and calm our own brains, relieving our stress, completing the stress cycle. We can breathe together, sing together, walk or move together, share a smile with our eyes, even a touch as we are comfortable, working to return to our best selves once again. We can remember that the person that we're with might have an alarm in the back of their head saying, danger, 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 as we chat about the weather or their family. We'll all need compassion as we seek to rebuild and remember our relationships. We can commit to do what we can to take the next best step. It can be offering a helping hand to a neighbor or sending money to the people of Ukraine. Once we help calm our survival brain, we can consider with some clarity what comes next. And we can revisit our commitments, discern those which are most important and dear to us, and then recommit to live into them. And more than anything, we will need grace and forgiveness for ourselves and for each other. In the days and weeks ahead, may we dream, and may we risk becoming in all the ways that we dream about. Let's take these words into a moment of silence together.
Let's sing together our closing hymn, hymn number 346. Come sing a song with me. I invite you to rise in body and or spirit, and let's sing our closing song together. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I may know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find.
Remember that online and in-person reflection groups will gather next, in person in the youth room, and we'll have the board listening session at 11:30. If you have a chalice or candle online, please join us as we extinguish our chalice with these words by Anais Nin. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. May we go forth and blossom as we go in peace.
Let's join together now in singing our unison benediction.